No checklist completed is going to save you. No bucket list is going to save you. No amount of blood, sweat, and tears that you've poured out in your life is going to save you. No amount of cash or worldly possessions is going to save you. You can't take it with you. You'll be dead. Buddha can't save you. Gandhi can't enlighten you. The Pope can't absolve your sins. The saints can't pray you into eternal life. Muhammad can't fix you. Allah isn't able. No president, no legislation, no Supreme Court justice, no state or nation or leader or celebrity. No one can save you because there is salvation in no one else.
The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in the land of the shadow of death, the light will shine on them. You shall multiply the nation. You shall make great their gladness. They will be glad in your presence, as with the gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you shall shatter the yoke of their burden and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their taskmasters, as at the battle of Midian. For every boot of the booted warrior in the rumbling of battle and cloak rolled in blood will be for burning fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of Yahweh of hosts will accomplish this. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Bearded Bible Thinker and Pals. So I have again with me Tanner and Marshall, as we did once before. We talked about some Andy Stanley stuff that last time we did this, but now we're going to talk about Christmas. If you couldn't tell, I'm even wearing a costume, my Christmas costume. Marshall is also wearing a Christmas costume. I think it looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah?
That's the only reason we'd make fun of you for it. So we like it. We're jealous.
I'll make sure my boss knows you appreciate my work attire.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks great. The reason for the season. So we wanted to just talk about a few things regarding Christmas because as you're watching this or listening to it, it's December now, and it's that month. And so it's Incarnation Month. We're thinking about all things Christmas and gifts, and we're all doing too much, and we're overworked, and we're stressing out because of gifts and things we have to get done, and all the Christmas parties and craziness that comes with it. So, but we want to talk about it from a Christian perspective. Like, what does a Christian Christmas look like? It sounds like a stupid thing to have to talk about because the whole thing is Christian, right? So let's just start by talking about Christmas in general, right? Like, so when you guys were young, what did Christmas look like for you? What are some things that you remember or that you enjoyed or liked or whatever?
So, well, for us, Christmas meant most time we went to a Christian private school called Faith Christian Academy. So the going there, we always put on a big Christmas play musical thing. So we were involved in that. We didn't really have it in church just because the church organization my dad belongs to doesn't do Christmas.
Yeah.
So we were kind of the oddball in that, as in, like right now we're going to be coming up to where we start doing Advent and stuff. Mm-hmm. My dad is a preacher, and he's going to just keep preaching through Genesis. He's not going to just because that's what the church does. But so it was kind of different, and my parents always stressed us that, it's because of Christ. That's the only reason why we do it. Otherwise, it's pointless. So
yeah, I mean, to be fair, that it's not. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to just keep preaching through Genesis, right? Like if we just kept preaching through Ephesians, that wouldn't be like because I'm neglecting my job as a pastor or something, right? But let me ask you this, because what you said intrigued me. When you did like school plays and things like, or whatever it was, did that ever like upset people from the church world you come from who like didn't?
It never like was there. They would let us. How do I say it? No one ever got like upset and the end of the world type thing. But we kind of just knew when we went to church that us and our cousins that attended with us at that same church were the only ones that we were kind of a little club. We only could talk about Christmas between ourselves. Otherwise, it was like don't talk about it. Or don't get caught talking about it.
Okay, sure.
So it was kind of, as a kid, it seemed more cooler. But now I just look back and show that my dad just was trying to respect the people around it and stuff. And like you said, no, it wouldn't be a big deal if we did keep going through Ephesians. But I think, especially in Christmas and stuff, it's the best time to talk about. It's good to talk about Jesus all year round, but
sure, yeah,
especially during Christmas, I feel like people are more willing to, that would not normally be listening, or very more open to hearing about Jesus and stuff. So,
yeah, that's one of the things that, like for us, that we. So like when people talk to me or ask me about like specifically like being really evangelistic, or whenever someone brings up like altar calls or something like that, right? Like one of the things that I'll always talk about is how like the times that you absolutely don't want to miss an elementary and clear presentation of the gospel is weddings, funerals, Christmas, and Easter, right? Because that, you're right, like that's a time that there are a lot of folks who maybe wouldn't otherwise be willing to listen or be around, frankly, to listen, right? Like we're going to have people here on Christmas Eve morning that, or different times in December that do not plan on being here in January.
Yeah,
right.
They're here with family or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What about you, Tanner?
Yeah, so I grew up, we always celebrated Christmas, and we'd always go to, usually somebody had a Christmas Eve service and a Christmas Day service, or a normal Sunday service. We'd always go to that. If not at our home church, we'd go somewhere else. It was interesting hearing you say that it was kind of like around your certain group you could talk about Christmas. I had kind of the same thing going, except it was because I went to public school, and it was not okay. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, so it was, that's the land of inclusivity down there.
Okay, sure,
So,
yeah.
At school, it wasn't acceptable to talk about Christmas exclusively, because then you're claiming the holiday for Christ only, instead of we needed to be celebrating all different religions' kind of holidays. So my mom was always very good about telling us, though, that it is about Christ's birth. And we actually, when I was little, one of my memories was we always had a birthday cake for Jesus. That was something cool that I remembered. But if you want to get my mom mad, if you want to get Tanner's mom angry, just tell her happy holidays, because that's the thing down there. In areas like that, to be less offensive or less exclusive, you can say happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
So that was something really good that I learned from my mom, to push against that this is the birth of Christ, and it's nothing else. All the other things are just made up.
Yeah. Happy holidays. It seems like in our lifetime is when, and I know I'm older than you, but still in your lifetime, that is something that, like, when we were little kids, right? Like when you guys would have been like too young to know any better, that wasn't really a thing. that Happy Holidays kind of stuff, right? It was still like, I remember when I was a kid, it was still like you still had a lot of folks going, why would they put Xmas? They're taking Christ's name out of, that's the whole point is, so like that was the big thing, right? But now, yeah, just to be super inclusive to everyone, it's Happy Holidays, and that's kind of the norm. But yeah, I like, for me, I was just gonna say cookies, right? Like my mom was really a bakeress, and so Christmas cookies is one of the. In fact, probably this year, my mother will come here from Bismarck, and she'll probably have, those little like cheese balls that you get, the big canisters of those things. She'll probably have one of those or something like that filled with Christmas cookies that she's baked. That's still a thing. And I remember I always got to lick the beaters. Oh yeah. You guys ever get to do that when you were kids? Yeah. I got to lick the beaters. That was fun. When you were young, growing up, what level of, not like you guys have both kind of talked about, and I mean, it was similar for me. I grew up in church, and so like I knew what Christmas was, right? It wasn't a secular thing. Like I knew that the gifts because of the greatest gift and those kinds of things, right? I knew informationally, right? And then as I came to Christ as a young boy, I mean, I got it. I knew what Christmas was about, but how much of it did you understand when you were a kid, like Christmas and the point of it all and all of that?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first this time.
My understanding was about as much as I told you a minute ago, that it was Jesus' birthday. That was, I definitely didn't understand the incarnation or anything like that, which, I mean, if I'm being honest, I still don't quite understand that.
Yeah, it's a lot to fathom.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But there was mostly just that. I knew that it was Jesus' birthday. I knew that it was about him being born, and I guess that was about as deep as it went. I knew that, and I knew he had to come. I knew he had to be born in order to die for our sins, was probably what I would have told you when I was 6 or 8 years old. I do remember, though, as I got older, into middle school and high school, with all of secularism around me and all of these other holidays that we celebrated, there came a time where I think I started to view it as it being Jesus' birthday was the Christian version of Christmas. I think subconsciously I had that attitude that, this is just a holiday. That's the objective reality. And
Sure.
Everybody takes and puts their own little tag on it.
Yep.
And that was kind of some of my faith starting to wane, if you will,
Sure.
when I was that age. So I had that going on. One of the cool things, though, I remember with all the kind of getting a little off topic, but there was a Jewish kid Orthodox Jewish kid in one of my classes in first grade. And I thought he was pretty cool because he brought his yarmulkes. They let him do that.
Oh, okay.
Couldn't wear hats in school unless it was December, and you were Jewish, so you could wear your yarmulke to school. And anyway, I got the chance to share the gospel with him.
Did you ever want a yarmulke because it was legal then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I wore he got me one of his yarmulkes. I wore it in school.
Nice.
But
I got one important question.
Yeah.
Is there picture evidence?
Oh yeah.
No,
do you have like a childhood picture of you wearing a yarmulke? Because that'd be awesome.
That would be pretty cool.
I would put that on our website
for the elder
for
picture?
the elder.
Yeah.
That's the elder picture.
Yeah.
Tanner in a yarmulke.
That would be hilarious.
That'd be confusing. wouldn't it?
Especially with me being 5 years old in the picture. But
Yeah.
anyway, this kid, I remember he told me, though, because I asked him, I said, well, my mom says Jews don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe that Jesus was actually the one that was supposed to come. And he said, well, he pulled me aside. He said, I do. Just don't tell my parents, though, because they will kill me if they found out that I believe in Jesus.
Wow.
So, anyway.
What grade was this?
This was first grade.
First grade?
Yeah.
Wow. I was not having conversations like this in the first grade. That's just the truth of it. Yeah. What about you, man?
I think I had a pretty good understanding as you could as a kid, just because, I don't know, maybe just because of the situation and stuff with the church and stuff. My parents were always making it clear why we did this when the church, because at the time my dad wasn't, I don't think my dad was a pastor quite yet when we were little kids, but he was in the leadership position and stuff, and they were always just like, we're doing this because it's the Jesus birthday. They said that, but it was just kind of very clear. We're celebrating that he came, he was born, so it was always very clear to us why we were doing this.
Yeah.
But I think it was also just because they wanted us to realize it's not because, I think also because they knew, just because of the church we were in and stuff, that we would get pushback or whatever. Sure. So maybe they hounded it in a little bit more than the average parent would, but as well as I could understand, I knew why it was, and that if my parents ever thought we were beginning to where it was all about the present stuff, my parents would cut it off in a heartbeat.
Yeah. No more presents. Yeah. So. Yeah. Another thing that, so something I think that you said that was important there was as much as I could understand. And I think that that's one of the things that I think about when I think about this subject, especially as it relates to kids, right? Because I think, I grew up in the church, right? Like I've said. And so, I grew up hearing when we were in the Christmas programs at church and all the things, right? And yet, there's only so much that a young mind gets.
Yeah.
Right? You can understand the basic concepts of it or whatever, but I think like so much of the rest of our faith, as you grow, even after you become a Christian, right? As you grow in faith and grow in understanding, like the more in-depth my understanding and appreciation for the gospel is, naturally, the better and more robust my understanding of the things that pertain to the gospel are, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a long way to say that I think that for me personally, I understood the things as a kid, but I understood them how a kid would. I got it, but there are definitely have been times in my life that as my understanding of other things pertaining to faith has grown deeper. Well, obviously your understanding of the incarnation, like how big of a deal it is that he came down, right? That God put on skin that he made. Right. So like you come to a better understanding of maybe the weight of it or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I also think for me, The Grinch, that was one thing that I really enjoyed about. Oh, yeah. That's still my favorite Christmas cartoon. Which probably is a problem. I don't know.
I was going to say which one.
Yeah. Which Grinch?
Well, they've remade the movie multiple times.
The Grinch. Come on, dude. I didn't watch any. Look, I know you're in your 20s, right? You're 30 now. How old are you? You're having to think about it right now.
30? Yeah.
30. Okay. Yeah.
29, 30. I'm in there. My wife will correct me if I'm wrong.
You're on the border.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, like, I existed before The Grinch was remade.
And I get that, and I like the cartoon one, but like they've remade it since because you got the Jim Carrey one,
yeah.
And you have the new one with what's his name, the British actor.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I don't think that the other ones are bad, okay, but the original one is what I grew up with.
Okay,
so like Jordan, okay, there are no better basketball players now. It's the same thing, right? That's what I grew up with. So, right. But yeah, The Grinch was a big deal when I was a kid, even though that's probably, I don't know, the most I guess, well, his heart grows 3 sizes at the end of it, right? So his heart's changed. Mm-hmm. Does he become a new creature? Do you think the Grinch is saved at the end of the movie? Is that what happened there?
Is it the Jim Carrey one or the
cartoon? Oh, man. All right. So let's jump into something with a little bit more substance than what we've been talking about. So one of the things, actually, Marshall, one of the things that the church that you grew up with, one of the reasons that they don't celebrate it is because, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons they don't celebrate it is because there's this idea that some people believe it wholeheartedly, some people have evidence for it, and then other people come along and say, no, there's no evidence for it. This is why. But Christmas is pagan. Is the idea, right? Like that Christmas has pagan roots, therefore we don't celebrate it. Is that accurate? That's kind of why they. Yeah. So that's a big question. Like for a lot of people, is Christmas a pagan holiday? Is it something that and like that even goes further, because is Christmas a pagan holiday? Okay, let's just assume that it is for a moment. At what point are we as Christians allowed to redeem things and turn them into Christian things and use them as Christian things or whatever? So that's another topic too, that encompasses some of this. So initial thoughts. What do you guys think? Is Christmas a pagan holiday?
I'm kind of like, if it was, we redeemed it. So,
so you're like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
To me, it doesn't matter. And I might be getting off subject, but it's the same reason why I know there's some churches that don't like Halloween. I think of it the same way. I'd rather have a church out there doing a trunk or treat where we can talk to people about Christ. I grew up at the private school I went to. They did a trunk or treat every year, and each truck was a different scene in the Bible. And people dressed up as Bible characters and stuff. So to me, I know some people like to call it Reformation Day or whatever, and that's great and all. But to me, I'm like, if we can redeem a holiday for the glory of Christ, I say you do it, Christmas is the best time to talk with people about Jesus Christ being born. So like I said, maybe it did. I don't think it was a pagan holiday, but if it was, I think we redeemed it, and made it worth celebrating Christ's birth. So,
yeah. So, we're gonna just real quick. I want to do this. I want to move to a video that I ran across that illustrates this well. This is an old CBS This Morning video in which a guy is interviewed. It's really short. This guy's interviewed, and he had written a book about Christmas being pagan, and some interesting things are said here. You can tell that it's like a whole bunch of unbelievers talking about this subject, but so there's definitely some interesting things that are said here. But let's tune into this for just a minute.
Celebrate Christmas in one way or another, according to the Pew Research Center. The holiday began in the 4th century when church officials chose to honor the birth of Jesus. But several customs we've come to associate with modern-day Christmas actually evolved from ancient pagan traditions celebrating the winter solstice. Historian Kenneth C. Davis is the best-selling author of the Don't Know Much About series, which we love. Welcome back to the table. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you.
It takes like a spiritual gift, by the way, to be able to write a series of books and the titles of the books explain that you don't know much about the subject.
Yeah.
This dude is an artist of some sort to be able to pull this off and sell these books.
Pleasure to be here.
So this is something I've always been fascinated by, because the Bible never talks about the date of Christ's birth, yet we celebrate December 25th. Why?
Well, primarily because in ancient Rome, there was a feast called Saturnalia that celebrated the solstice, What is the solstice? It's the day that the sun starts coming back. The days start getting longer. And most of the traditions
We
that
celebrate
have
that here,
relate
too.
to Christmas
In North
to
Dakota.
the solstice, which was celebrated in ancient
going
Rome
back to work
on
in the
December
sunlight.
25th. So when Christianity became the official religion, in a sense, in Rome, they were able to fix this date, which some scholars say may be earlier than that. There's a little discrepancy about it, but there's no question that the fact that it was celebrated in Rome as an important day with gift giving, candle lighting, and singing and decorating houses really cemented Christmas as December 25th.
You always say you don't know much according to your books, but do you know why we have a Christmas tree as opposed to a bunch of hydrangeas, which I think are really pretty?
This is another
Fluffy and pretty.
This is another.
How about that, Ken?
This is another pagan tradition. So Christmas is really about bringing out your inner pagan.
For pagans, it is.
That's true. That's a really solid reason for the season shirt right
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
But Christmas is really, that should be a quote to write down, right? Christmas is really about bringing out your inner pagan. Solid stuff.
Christmas tree really comes to.
Who knew we had an inner pagan? Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah.
Wise men said that. I can't remember.
Well, it's like Halloween and a lot of other things we do. These all predate Christianity. But in the Norse world, Germany,
Wrong, homie.
The Scandinavian countries, where
Christianity started in the garden. That's where I'm at.
Yep.
Right?
winter was really serious and the solstice was really an important idea, they celebrated the return of life by celebrating an evergreen tree. When Christianity came in, they started to use the evergreen tree, the pagan symbol, as a symbol of the tree of paradise. And they started to hang an apple on it. So little red balls on green trees.
Oh, that's
getting
the ornaments.
picture here.
That's where the idea
That's
for
right.
ornaments
So
came
all of these things really celebrate the idea that light and life are coming back into the world, which is essentially what Christmas means to Christians across the world.
Right. And mistletoe?
So
So what are your thoughts?
I'm already ready to go with that one because that's actually one I wish I knew. It's from a trusted source. It's my dad, but I wish I knew where he had all this information on. But the Scandinavians did bring trees into their house, but it wasn't. Maybe at some point it got turned into a celebration, but it was to help out with cabin fever, basically. You brought something green into your house.
Oh, wow.
And what do we like about the
interesting.
trees? What do we like about the smell
Yeah.
and stuff? And it brought some color into the huts or whatever. And like I said, I need to get that information from my dad, but my dad had found that somewhere. And
yeah, I know. Like one of the articles that I ran across when I was looking into some of this stuff, actually talks about how so much of it's on what is this Bible? It's right over here. I have the article. What's the website? Gotquestions.org. Got Questions, and this is a pretty good website, unless we're talking about eschatology, but it is actually a really good website to go to if people have like quick questions or something like that about certain things. But in that, and then another article on the Gospel Coalition. From some years ago or whatever, they start talking about it, and there's like such a list of things sometimes that people give, where it's like, oh well, candle lighting. He even mentioned candles, right? It's like, well, that's cute, but it's not like they had Menards to go buy lights at, right? Everything you did was candle light, right? So some of it is so vague that it's like
Yeah, this guy clearly himself is a pagan. He seems pretty proud of it. So he has pagan presuppositions.
Yeah.
And you could tell his whole argument, if you could break down his argument, but the sounds of it to me, it sounded like he just said, well, there's candles, there's trees, there's gift giving.
House
decorating.
decorating.
House decorating. It's in the winter. So we have all the ingredients, and if pagans did it, then they're pagan ingredients. So now we have a pagan cake. Now we have a pagan Christmas. Like, that's just such a horrible argument.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because like even how did he just describe the at the end of that little, before I hit pause, he said something like celebrating light and life coming into the world. And that's basically what Christmas means to Christians.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
So what he was doing there was clearly suppressing the truth. We just made a big circle here.
In unrighteousness.
Yes.
Even. Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess there's probably no other way to suppress the truth than in unrighteousness.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Well, let's just keep going. There's a little bit left, but
Mistletoe, we can thank the Druids for that. The Druids believed that mistletoe was an all-powerful healing item. It hung from the sacred oak. In fact, if you met somebody in the forest, you gave them the sign of peace under the mistletoe. So people started to hang mistletoe above their doorways as a symbol of peace. This was such a powerful symbol of paganism that English churches actually banned the use
peace?
of it. And in fact,
like, what about the
real
Prince
war
of
in
Peace in
Christmas
Isaiah? Clearly pagan.
well, mistletoe and the Druids was long before Isaiah wrote in the 700s BC. So yeah, this is actually amazing, right? Like how much of, so some of this I think is, you nailed it a second ago, Tanner, because a lot of this has to do at the end of the day with his presuppositions as a pagan, right? Like this is how he sees things. This is how, so a lot of these things, like I said, like mistletoe, for instance, it represents this or that or whatever. I mean, mistletoe for a lot of people today doesn't represent the life or blood of Christ, as he says on the screen here or whatever. It represents getting a makeout, right? Like it represents, hey, come here, baby, give me a kiss, right? I mean, that's all I ever knew. I didn't know what mistletoe had anything to do with Christmas when I was a kid, except that you're supposed to hold that up and kiss a girl under it, right? Yep. I mean, I don't know. So if the point being, this is kind of the logic, like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder logic, right? At the end of the day, if to me this represents this thing or that represents that thing, well then, I mean, I don't know, okay, but yeah, I don't know. This intrigued me, but it is a good example, I think, in a short one, but a good example of how the world thinks about this, and some of what you'll hear online or even from Christians at times who just haven't done research or thought deeply about it. As we think about where did Christmas come from? Yeah. Like these are common things that you'll hear from people.
Begins with the Puritans in around 1659. They knew.
So he's talking about now the suppression of
the traditions
Christmas.
Were pagan ideas. The Puritans banned Christmas for about 20 years in America before the celebration became just too popular.
You'll be glad to know all of your answers today were correct.
Well, she's the authority.
Yeah. You know a lot, Kenneth C. Davis. It's
Our fact checker over here.
Yes.
Merry
good to have you at the
Christmas to
table.
you, Kenneth Davis.
This does not take away. We're not the Grinch spoiling it here. It still has all the meaning that it has, but we can celebrate it and understand where these things come from.
Good day to you with your favorite grandchildren. I look forward to that one day.
So
90% of Americans celebrate Christmas.
So, yeah. So, is Christmas pagan? What are your thoughts?
No. The first thing he started with there, I've looked up some of that stuff that he talked about, like the, what was the first holiday he mentioned?
The solstice.
Solstice.
Yeah, winter solstice.
And he was talking about in the 400s, that's when Christmas trees started.
Yep.
I read that in the 400s was actually when pagans started using Christmas trees for things other than Christmas trees. So, yeah, for pagans, maybe that's where it started. I mean, so much of the history you look into, it's all subjective. It depends on who's presenting the information because, just like we talked about, he collected all that information assuming that Christ isn't real, and then took that information and used it to try to prove that, and just obviously pushed away all of the truth that was in all of those symbols and things that he just brought up, and brought up some arbitrary symbols. So I guess if you're going to take a bunch of information that you may or may not know is true from the past, and then add it all up and see which information came first, who said it first, and then use that to disprove Christ, that's not good enough, because we know lots of things, like in the Bible, there's all kinds of so I'm studying a little bit ahead for Proverbs, because we're going to do that for Bible study.
Yep.
There's all kinds of wisdom books from the Egyptians that were written before Solomon was alive.
Yeah. And some people, I'm sure what you're reading, some people assume like this is, that's where he's getting a lot of his stuff. Like it's plagiarized, some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll say, oh, well, he just collected this from the,
Right.
the other gods.
Yeah.
And whichever,
The other guys.
whichever
Right.
came first, I mean, that's just a horrible argument that whichever came first is correct. Because if you want to go all the way back, like you said, Christianity started in the beginning. So, if you look at all that information that he collected from the light of there is truth that Christ was promised to come, and go from there, and then evaluate that information through the light of the truth that Christ is real, then any argument they could bring up doesn't matter.
Right.
Preach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think the thing about that sometimes we have to be careful of too, and this has to do with obviously vastly more than just Christmas or something, or even holidays. This is just the world that we live in now, where everyone has a platform, everyone has a, if you're good at design and you find a good like website host or something, well, now you've got, you're your own news outlet kind of a thing, right?
Right.
So everybody, you'll hear people so often just take like a blog that they've read or something that could just be, it could be somebody legit, or it could be some teenager in his mom's basement who read some article somewhere, of a guy who read some article somewhere, and now we just take it and read it and go, okay, I'll quote this.
Yeah,
right. And it's like, at what point is that just a bunch of trash that we haven't actually done any research on the thing at all? But yeah, so let's think about it for a moment. Let's assume that it was indeed pagan. But I'm where Tanner is, and I'm like, at the end of the day, you might be there, maybe not. I don't know.
Well,
And
so let me clarify. I'm
Yeah.
with you guys on it, but if someone's going to approach me from the standpoint of saying it started pagan, well then fine. I'm not going to argue.
Doesn't matter.
I'm not going to argue with you if it started pagan or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that we redeemed it regardless. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a good lesson, I think, too, to a good thing to think about, because there are going to be lots of moments in life, right? Like when we're dealing with an unbeliever or a new Christian, where it actually doesn't make sense to bring up the whole thing and to get into a debate about it. It makes more sense to say, does it really matter anyway? And then get into Christ, and which actually brings us, I think, to the maybe the next thing here. Like, what does it mean to redeem something that is pagan in origin? And to be clear, whenever you hear any of us talk about something being pagan, the presupposition here, and what I would argue the presupposition of Scripture and all truth is that you're either a pagan or you are worshiping Yahweh and Christ. Like, those are the only two options, right? You're either a Christian or a pagan. And they're shaking their heads. So we're all on the same page there, and I knew we would be. So, but at what point can we redeem something that is pagan? And at what point should we just like throw the baby and the bathwater out because it's just all bad? Let me give you an example before we jump into it. I think for me, there are a couple of things that are really hot in the Christian world right now, in evangelicalism, that I think are things that cannot be redeemed. That like we can't take this thing and all of a sudden make it Christian, or use it as Christians and make it helpful, or redeem it. One of those things I think is like the Enneagram. Right. Yep. So there, without getting into the Enneagram, it comes from pagan demonic origins, right? But assuming that it doesn't, the whole idea behind the Enneagram, it ends up replacing the Holy Spirit, because it's what tells you where you'll be sinning and what to watch out for. It's what tells you where your giftings are. It's what tells you, like, it replaces the Holy Spirit's job in your life, right? And it also replaces the Word in your life, because so many people are, instead of thinking, the people who subscribe to the Enneagram, so many of them will think, oh, wait, what's my number? What does this say? Before they're ever going to think, what does God have to say about this in His Word? So that's something that I think that's not a redeemable thing, because it actually, its very essence is something. It's something that takes the place of things that are irreplaceable. Another thing is CRT. Right. Yep. I mean, that's another thing that comes from origins that are not good, not helpful, that are meant to destroy. And so Christians, though, all over the place attempt to use that and shape it and mold it and try and utilize it for good purposes. And like, why can we not do that? Right. So like, that's the preface, right? So the question is like, at what point can we redeem something? And at what point should we stay away from it? Because I'm totally with the, like, if Christmas were pagan, I don't think it is, but if it were, I totally think, okay, great. Who in Dickinson is celebrating the winter solstice in December now, right? Like 8 people, maybe, right? Everyone is celebrating Christmas because Christ won, right? Because Christmas, like, because it's His kingdom, right? So if it was pagan, we won. So who cares, right? Like, that's where I'm at. But so, like, what's the difference? Where's that line?
Because well, if it starts taking away from God, Jesus, or the Holy Spirit, then it's not redeemable. I think that has to be a standard. If it's like you were talking about with the, I'll say it wrong, the
Enneagram?
The Enneagram.
Yeah.
It's taking out key things to our beliefs. So at least that's how I look at it. If it's taking out one of the 3 in any way, then it's not redeemable, because nothing trumps those 3.
Yeah, or if it changes the gospel, right? Like that's what I believe the big problem with CRT is. Right. At the end of the day, like it changes the meaning of some pretty important stuff. Yeah.
I think another thing that those unredeemable things do too is they end up having a different foundation to them. So they like, in order to practice one of those things, you would have to change your worldview. Technically, like with the Enneagram, I've heard people that use that, and they'll Jesus has a number, and he fits into one of the Enneagram numbers according to people that use it. So then all of a sudden, Jesus is not the standard, but there's some other standard that's above him.
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue. And
yeah.
I mean, that's a
sort of, yeah.
That crumbles
right.
all of existence down into nothing.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So I think that's something. If it alters your worldview or causes you to use it foundationally in a reason that you can't use it. But I think when you have things that pagans used or that pagans are using to do ungodly things, that doesn't make it unredeemable, because technically, if that were the case, we would have to leave the world altogether. Someday that'll be true, but when the whole world is replaced with nothing pagan, when everything's worshiping Christ. But not yet. Now we're in a mixed world with pagans and Christians.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to your point, if that were true, and just anything that pagans used, we had to discard, we certainly couldn't be recording this podcast right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing with the winter solstice that just reminded me of is January. That's named after the Greek god Janus or Janus or however you say it, the god of the door. But I'm not worshiping that god every New Year's Day.
Yeah. Not only that, but as we think about January, we think about New Year's, and presumably we'll have some other podcast that's coming out at the beginning of January at some point or whatever, and it's not going to have to do with that. Right? Like that's not going to be the basis of it. In my mind, we have New Year's. I mean, that's something that even biblically God would have Israel celebrate things like that, like harvest and different things like that.
Well, even Israel had a new year.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, for us, as far as I'm concerned, January is all about Life Month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. The sanctity of human life.
Yeah, that's what we're going to celebrate in January. So. Yeah. You guys, any other thoughts about like redeeming those kinds of things, or like what, so the criteria, if it changes something fundamental about your faith, or causes you, another way really to say a similar thing is what you said, Tanner, which is it causes, if to subscribe to the thing you're talking about, you have to subscribe to a different worldview. That's obviously like an off limits situation, right? The whole thing is about the worldview. So like, I think those are some good things, right? And to understand that like there is a sense in which, so let's say this real quick. What are some things that we have redeemed, or that we can redeem, or maybe something that hasn't been yet, but should be maybe? Like, I don't know if you guys have ever thought about that sort of a thing, but I mean, I think about things like technology, for instance, right? Like what we're there. You can use so many things for good and godly purposes. Or so we could use this technology that we're using right now to record this, for studying the scriptures or whatever, or we could be using the same exact equipment to record pornography.
No.
Right? I mean, so you can utilize these things are inanimate objects, right? These cameras don't have souls or anything, right? So like, I think this is something that we can use things that have been created by pagans.
Yeah.
Right. I think about my iPhone.
Right.
Right. Like one of the things that we battle in our day is companies. Right. Companies that just have to come out and make a statement about this or a statement about that or whatever. And it's like, first of all, stop that. Nobody cares what you think about almost anything. Just make the stuff. That's really what we want. But then like, Apple is decidedly, not Christian,
right,
as a company. And yet, people are watching Apple Podcasts. This is on Apple Podcasts. And people listened to our walk through Andy Stanley stuff on Apple Podcasts, probably from their iPhones, obviously. Like, so like there are lots of examples, I think, of things that we use as Christians for godly purposes to further the kingdom, right? To alert more people of the King and who he is and that he's the King. And yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like that?
Yeah, I think, well, like all those things you just mentioned, they're you said they're inanimate objects. They don't have any moral quality to them, and they don't force any morality on you. And I think already when we're thinking about stuff being pagan, so we have to stay away from it or something like that, I think it's really easy thinking about that to get confused on just remembering why anything is pagan. Like when you think about the ground wasn't cursed until Adam sinned, and all of creation, there was no sin, there was no such thing as death. So this stuff could not have been, if Adam wouldn't have sinned, then this stuff could not have been used for anything bad. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that stuff is actually just it's a victim to us. When we think about it, all the technology and things that's being used for evil stuff, it's a victim to us. I even think about like artificial intelligence. I know it's kind of scary to see what people are doing with it and what negative things have been done with it, but that's a result of sin. If everyone was righteous, then artificial intelligence would do some awesome stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it probably will. Right?
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. I think there are folks who so I mean this is already out there. There are people who are thinking about and working on moving. I mentioned pornography earlier, for instance, right? Like that's an epidemic in across the world, right? And there, before you know it, right? Not claiming I'm a cessationist, right? I'm not claiming to be a prophet here, but before you know it, I think that we're going to see the ability for people to just type the name of like their neighbor or the girl they go to school with or the guy they know from somewhere or whatever and see an artificial intelligence porn situation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, I heard someone call that idea rightly, I think, digital rape. I forget who said that, but those kinds of things, AI is going to do those kinds of things. I mean, it is. You're also going to see travesties like pastors who were plagiarizing other preachers because they just didn't want to do the work. You're going to see that be undetectable now.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be doing the same thing, but some machine learning thing is going to be doing that work for them. But we're also going to have the capability to utilize that for good and godly purposes. I've actually already used it. I used for my preach. I'm just kidding.
Fired.
No,
Ben would be so proud right now.
Yeah, I used it on the Bearded Bible Thinker Facebook page because I don't have time for all that, right? So I just got on ChatGPT and typed in, I don't know, something like list 30 quotes from whatever, right? From Puritans about this, or list 30 Bible verses about this subject or whatever. And it does it all really fast or whatever. And then you can just copy and paste. So a lot of those little like quotes or whatever, that's how I got them in the first place. And what would have taken me a long time to find all these things and work through it took me probably 20 minutes instead. So you can use these for things that aren't like horrific. Like it can be a helpful thing, right? But like anything else, I think we just have to, people who are born again, who are new creations, are going to think differently about how to use everything, right? We eat to the glory of God.
Right.
So everything changes and everything is different. So you guys have anything else before we jump into something else? No? All right. Okay. So we're going to jump into consumerism, the consumerism of Christmas, sort of the American Christmas thing. We'll jump into Santa Claus and some other stuff. But before we do that, check this out. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a minute and remind you to check out another couple of podcasts that we have going on. The Babbling Pastors podcast drops a new episode every Wednesday morning, and in that podcast I chat with my longtime pal, the Honest Youth Pastor, and we chat about theology and ministry. It's a lot of fun and probably more entertaining than this. You can also check out our Preaching at Hillside podcast, and that's found on various platforms and expanding all the time. That's published by Monday of each week and is just what it sounds like. It's we're really creative around here. It's just our preaching ministry at Hillside Baptist Church here in Dickinson, North Dakota. Also, every Wednesday, check out the Herbie Ray podcast, hosted by my lovely bride, Donna. With various special guests, she talks about motherhood, wifery, homeschooling, and all sorts of other things from a Reformed biblical perspective. So, rinse all the mud out of your ears and give those things a listen. You guys weren't around for this, but Marshall was definitely just playing air guitar to that. I don't know what that was about.
It was the banjo.
Yeah. Oh, the banjo. Okay.
He was air plucking.
I think that instrument was probably a dobro, actually.
Whatever.
I come from a long line of hillbillies in nearly in Kentucky. So growing up with bluegrass and stuff, I think that was a dobro. I'm an expert on the matter.
I'll take your word for it.
Sure. Okay. All right. Hey, so let's talk about some other issues, right? Let's move past the paganism thing and talk about how pagans still use this holiday in some ways, right? So I think one of the big battles, even in the church, is consumerism, right? I mean, this is a battle. If we erase that we're even talking about Christmas, this is a battle in the church world today. We've been trained, I think, for a generation or two to be consumers when it comes to church. And people choose a church because of what it has for me. People choose a church because they enjoy the worship music or something, and not for any sort of biblical reasons, but because they enjoy something about it or whatever. That's not wrong to enjoy something about your church, obviously, but we think about it as a consumer, not as someone who firstly understands that, look, reason numero uno for going on Sunday mornings and being a part of the congregation is to be a part of the congregation of God as we worship and lift his name up. Like, that's the whole point. That's the whole reason. So, and Christmas, obviously, this time of year is riddled with consumerism. I think it's we just as this is out now, we just moved past Thanksgiving, right? And one of the greatest illustrations of the stupidity of all of this is that the very next day is Black Friday. After the one day a year that most people come together and give thanks, many of them just arbitrarily to no one, but just give thanks, which makes no sense unless there's someone you're thanking.
Yeah. More of those presuppositions.
Right. But people will gather to give thanks and maybe even say prayers and things like that, and then they run over one another to get a big screen TV the very next morning because they're greedy and not thankful. Right. Yeah. So it's all about consumerism. What do you see? What are some of the sins behind that? Why do we struggle with that in our culture, in the church? Like, what do you think is some of the stuff that's like behind some of that?
Well, I definitely think they've lost the reason for the season.
Yeah.
Because even in...
You mean the winter solstice?
Well no. But what I think about is on the night of the Last Supper, when Jesus got down and washed his disciples' feet. It was a servant's heart, and he modeled that for us. So I think that's the heart that we need to be modeling, which most of us have lost, because... And sometimes it starts out for great reasons, you want to get everybody you care about a gift and this and that. And you know what? There's no we're all also called to be good stewards of what we have, So maybe this year, instead of having to go out and get everybody a gift, you get everybody a card instead, and maybe not participate in the craziness of this of the season. So I think it comes back to what's in our hearts, and have we lost sight of what the season's about, and that's.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be easy to do in our culture to do what you're talking about. And probably all of us do it and have to be on our guard for that kind of thing. Because America is a consumeristic country. I mean, people are consuming. There are people who I think so the people who just react to things on YouTube or whatever, you've seen this, or on TikTok or whatever it might be. They make a living, some of these people, and some of them a very good living, while people consume them consuming something else, and then they get paid for it and then go consume things. Like this is the nation that we live in, right? So this is what we're surrounded with. And so it can be easy even for the Christian to really lose sight. I mean, this is the whole world. These are the lenses that we wear sometimes. So it can be easy for any of us to lose sight of that. It's got to be intentional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we talked about suppressing the truth earlier, and the truth is that we don't deserve anything except to go to hell. So, right away we get entitled. We start
Encouraging.
Yeah, I know. Right? Yeah. But the whole point is that God's grace is freely given to sinners who repent and believe in him. And I just wanted to read one of my favorite things from Acts. The Apostle Paul, he says in Acts 20, verse 35, he says, "In everything I showed you that by laboring in this manner you must help the weak, and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he himself said, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" And, you hear that all the time. That's like a bumper sticker quote.
Yeah.
It's more blessed to give than to
Yeah.
receive. I mean, that's such the Christmas thing.
Yeah.
But if you actually think about the fact that Jesus gave an infinite amount when you consider the incarnation, that where he came from, he had to forsake so much more and sacrifice so much more than, any of us could ever even imagine sacrificing in order to give to us. Like you mentioned, him washing the disciples' feet. I mean, that's the servant's job, but the King of Kings did it. And so I think when we're giving our gifts, that needs to be the thing we're remembering, is that we're giving to worship him who gave.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing, as we think about maybe some of what's behind consumeristic thinking, specifically when it comes to Christmas, we're in a situation in which we're surrounded by a culture that's consumeristic, right? Some of the very ways that we celebrate this, in fact, probably the most memorable way that we celebrate this is gifts, right? Besides the Christmas tree and all of that stuff, the Christmas tree goes up, the kids are automatically looking under it, right?
Yep.
Like that's just how it works. And so as we think about gifts, it's super easy, I think, even for adults to think, I know, and I'm so thankful for the gift that Jesus is in his incarnation, but what am I getting?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that like greed, covetousness, there are all sorts of like idolatrous things that come along with a consumeristic kind of Christmas, right? Of thinking about it in that way. Pretty quick, we're worshiping stuff. We're worshiping the gifts, right, instead of the giver, which is something that I just before we recorded this a day or so ago, I recorded a Thanksgiving thing that's already out at this point, and and talked about that briefly, that this worshiping the gifts rather than the giver. This is something that we as Christians struggle with all the time and go back and forth with and have to be intentional about. And the flesh wants to worship the stuff. Yeah. You know, we want the apple or whatever it was. I'm assuming it's an apple. It probably wasn't a lime. I don't know. Apples are good. I think so. It's probably, since it was before the fall, it probably was an apple that literally tasted like apple pie. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, it's probably beside the point.
Yeah.
But
I want apple pie.
yes. So let's talk briefly about Santa Claus.
Okay.
You mean St. Nicholas?
Yeah, that's right. Ho ho no. Okay. What? So what are you thoughts about that? Because that's a whole thing, right? Like even Christian parents. So probably there will be people who watch this or listen to this podcast who have this question, like legitimately young parents who aren't there yet, who have this question about like, do we do that? Is it sin? Is it like, what do we do with Santa Claus?
Well,
right.
I can tell you how I was raised and what we do, and we do it the same. Growing up, my parents were very upfront with us. There's no Santa Claus.
Oh, if you're listening to this and your children are around, buyer beware. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I ruined it.
Spoiler alert!
I know, but
Santa's dead.
So my parents always were like, Santa Claus is based off a real person, and that person, Saint Nick or whatever, and you tell us about it, but Santa Claus isn't real. He's a fun, fictional character that makes all the, bedtime stories, all the movies about Christmas, but Christ is the reason for the thing. And so that's how I grew up, and this was actually tough for my wife because she grew up the opposite. She grew up with that every Christmas there was presents labeled from Santa Claus, and growing up with that, so we came to an agreement and we raised them kind of the same way it was. All my kids know there's no Santa Claus, but we are very what's the word? We ask them not to ruin another child that might.
Oh, sure. Yeah, be discreet about it.
Yeah.
Wise, yeah.
Just because, little kids will speak the truth regardless. So, we told them,
unless they're going to get in trouble, then they're the biggest liars on the planet.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I have to hold my breath every time we're around someone's kids that do things because I'm always terrified Maya or just one of them are just gonna. There's no, but all my kids know there's no Santa Claus, and I try, we've had talks with them saying some people do the whole Santa Claus things, and that's how their family does it. We're raising you differently. So like I said, I think, I don't know. To me, Christ is the reason for the season. There's no, Santa Claus is fun. It's no different than I like reading the Chronicles of Narnia. Aslan's cool, but
sure.
So that's how we looked at it, and the reason is for Christ. So why would we give Santa Claus front stage? So that's how we looked at it.
Yeah, I grew up the same. I've never believed that Santa was real. I was that kid that went around telling everybody too, because I thought it was kind of funny when you tell them Santa's not real. But, yeah,
I'm pretty sure that happened when my kids went to public school for that time that they did.
Oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure that revelations like that came.
Yeah.
To other children.
Well, yeah, that's our conviction too. We're not going to let our kids believe in Santa. Our kids are younger, but whenever the time comes, if they ask, they're going to be told right away that that's not true. And I think it can be really tough for parents, especially young parents, especially if they have good memories of that, like you were saying, because it could be fun. I mean, it's fun to see the little kids get excited because they think, what did Santa bring me, and staying up late and that whole thing. I think that gets very sentimental for people, especially because it's a tradition that they grew up with. Some people do the cookies and stuff, leaving cookies and milk out. And I think we should be probably tactful when we're telling people, that telling them what the implications of that are. When you do tell your kids that Santa's real, first of all, and it is lying, because he's not. And lying is breaking God's law. That's Jesus's law. What it's really about, right? So, first of all, that's offensive to him to do that, I think, frankly. And I know that can be offensive to people that want their kids to believe in Santa and have fun with it. But I think another thing, when you're thinking about it, if you want to play around and joke about it, I think is another thing. I don't think it's wrong to watch. I like the Tim Allen Santa movies. I think those are pretty fun.
Those are awesome.
Yeah, but and I remember when we were little, there was a time that we would pretend that Santa was real, but we all knew it was pretend, and I think that's important to that. The kids need to know that it's pretend, because if you're telling them that Santa's real and then all of a sudden they find out, no, that was just something we did for fun, but actually Christ is real, and it's not just for fun, he's real. Well, are they going to believe you then? You've just really ruined your credibility, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the troubles is whenever some parents hear you say what you've just said, there's going to be an automatic, oh, come on, right? We all have those kinds of reactions to certain things, right? But it would, given the nature of the seriousness of what you've just said, I think it would behoove any parent who's listening or watching this right now to at least think about what you said. Like if maybe this is something that a lot of parents haven't thought about. You might be engaging in this or embracing this like 0 to 60, right? And having never thought about the credibility thing, or like, oh, if I tell them this guy's real and he's coming down the chimney and doing miraculous things that are impossible and all these things, and then, oh, we were just kidding, that didn't happen. But virgin birth and such, right? Feeding 5,000, that was all real. So I mean, it actually logically makes sense that would be a problem, right? So it's definitely something to think about. I know for me, I grew up, I don't remember, to be honest with you, if I actually believed in Santa Claus or when I didn't, but I don't remember believing in Santa Claus. Part of that is because when my Christmas memories, I don't have a super awesome memory in general, but when I remember things from Christmas in my childhood past, I remember them in a home that we lived in that was like 100-year-old schoolhouse. And so you could hear anything and everything. And frankly, for a long time in that house, I think the whole time we lived in it, my bedroom door was a curtain. Oh, right. Yeah. So you couldn't be very sneaky in this situation is what I'm saying. Right. So even if you wanted to be like, oh, Santa's, he's gonna go to bed. Right. All the things there's I heard you. Right. I heard you put the presents under the tree. Right. It definitely wasn't at midnight. Right. Or whatever. I think that it's not a good thing at all. I get, even so for me, I wouldn't be dogmatic about this and tell someone they were wrong if they didn't follow what I'm about to say, but which is an important, don't erase that after I say this. But I think personally, even kidding around about it can be damaging. Yeah. Because inevitably, even if they know you're kidding, they know you're joking, they know it's just a game sort of a thing, at the end of the day, what you've done is taken what is meant to be one of the most major moments in the year in which we celebrate God becoming a man so that he could die in our stead, live in our, like, this is just like Easter and Christmas. That's the most the most major holidays that Christians celebrate. And so you've taken that and thrown in some other thing in there, even as a game, and but it does kind of take the place. Yeah. In fact, I'm working right now on, for the first time, Bearded Bible Thinker merchandise, right? Ooh. And the first one, and I have what are they called? Like the testers or whatever, like the first things to test the quality or whatever. Yeah. I have those things. I have 2 shirts coming and a coffee cup right now. So I can check this website out and see. It's the same thing that the Honest Youth Pastor uses. So I'm taking his word for it. I'm sure it's good stuff. But so the first one is like, it's got the logo on a sleeve, and then it says, luck, there is no luck. There is only providence, right? Nice. But I actually want to make one soon and put it like on the YouTube channel or something, because I want to make one that says Santa is a glory hog, because that's actually how I think about Santa Claus. I think that it actually robs God of glory when we mess around with the whole Santa Claus thing, because he becomes the thing kids are thinking about. He becomes the thing kids are looking forward to. Like, he replaces God and Christ and the incarnation. And Santa's the one bringing the gifts, right? Yeah. So never mind that was the greatest gift in all of history. Which toy did I get from Santa, right? So like, I think it's damaging on a number of levels, right? Now, we're not doing church discipline on people that have, that do the Santa came down the chimney thing, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not looking at it like that. But I do think that, it's hurtful, like, and certainly can be damaging to our kids, right? Yeah. And this is also a really perfect opportunity if we haven't talked about this at all, but like, if you're a dad, or single mom, for that matter, and you struggle with, or haven't begun to, but want to lead your family in worship and things like that, it's hard to find a more perfect time of year for you to dip your toes into that. Yeah. Because there is so much material out there that can help you with that for this time of year. The things to be able to read to your children, devotionals, scriptures, whatever. So like, this is an opportunity that shouldn't be wasted, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, this is, whether it's with our children, like Marshall said, with the Halloween thing or trunk or treating or whatever, we want to, I'm a Reformation Day guy myself, but I don't take issue with what you said about that. If we can turn something into a witnessing opportunity, I mean, why would we not do that? Yeah. Right. So I think that this time of year shouldn't be taken for granted. The focus should remain on Christ and not on his competitor. And I think that our families and churches and nation then would benefit greatly if a whole bunch of Christians literally just focused on Christ during Christmas time, and proclaiming him and worshiping him and all of those things. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point you just brought up too at the end there. Continuing to have Santa in your house or whatever, as a Christian, really just it kind of enables the people that are just doing Santa, because they're not hearing, like you said, it's not a witnessing opportunity if you're saying, well, Santa and Jesus too.
Yeah.
And something else, one other thing with Santa that actually makes me a little bit angry is how he's used. Well, like the elf on the shelf. Isn't that thing used to watch you to see if you're being good or bad, to tell Santa, then you don't get toys?
Right. Naughty or nice.
Yeah, that actually makes me furious because that's not how, first of all, that's not how Christ works. The answer is like what your shirt says. You're all on the naughty list. Mm-hmm. Except for Christ. Christ is the only one that's not on the naughty list. So we can't be.
Santa Calvin
is
on my shirt. We
can't be teaching, that's teaching kids works-based salvation, really.
Yeah.
If you want to compare that to Christ, you don't do good and bad things for him and then get rewards based on that. There's consequences to your actions, but your rewards are based off of. You don't want them based your final rewards based off of your actions. That's for sure.
Yeah. Besides, what kind of pedophile creeper is this Santa Claus that we're talking about anyway?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake.
He'd get shot if he came into this town.
Yeah,
coming down somebody's chimney.
That's true. Yeah,
he'd be dead, Santa. Santa, bye.
Oh yeah, there'd be some tattooed up dad that was like, yeah, that'd be a crime scene.
Yeah,
what that'd
he
be.
would have a present of buckshot for him.
Cookies and milk. Those are my cookies and milk.
We need to go deer hunting. We got a reindeer up there on the roof.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, we would shoot Santa defending our homes and then eat all of his deer. That's what would happen in Dickinson, North Dakota. I really hope your children aren't listening to this because we're going to get in trouble with someone if that is the case. I don't know. So, all right, guys, what is the meaning of Christmas? Marshall, go. What is the actual meaning of Christmas? Like we've talked about all the pagan this and that and the other thing. We've talked about we've talked a lot about what's not the meaning of Christmas or why some of those things are a problem. So what is the point of Christmas? What is, in fact, the reason for this? And if you give me a Sunday school Jesus answer and that's it, that we want details.
Okay.
Details.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say is the unfolding of the Old Testament. You get to see it is about the Messiah that was prophesied throughout the whole Testament, especially in Isaiah, Jeremiah, coming and humbling himself to be born and to grow up to come and save us from a hell that we deserve.
Yeah.
That's what Christmas is about, is that my Savior, it's the day which I should be celebrating all year round, but it's the day that I've chosen to celebrate that my Savior cared enough about this sinner to be born to eventually die for my sins.
Yeah. I really need an organ button.
Yeah, that would be
I really need to do that.
Situation right there.
I really need to do that. Yeah. Tanner, what are you adding, dude?
Well, you mentioned the meaning of Christmas. I think one thing, like I told you, I obviously don't know everything about the incarnation. But as I'm learning more, I do know this now that really the incarnation gives actual meaning to everything. Because if Christ didn't come to earth, if there was no God-man, if we had no mediator, we would have no connection with God whatsoever. All the other false gods can't even make the claims that they make because they have no connection with us. There's absolutely no relatability there. And I heard a quote from Van Til. He said, the proof of Christianity is that without it, you can't prove anything else. And I think, ironically, all the paganism and everything we've been talking about, it's proven wrong by Christmas because the fact that the God-man, there is a God-man. He came to earth. He's the incarnate Son of God. We have a connection with God. We have actual opportunity to relate to him. One thing I just want to read real quick from Romans 10. Romans 10, starting in verse 5. says Moses writes about the righteousness which is of law. The man who does these things shall live by them. But the righteousness of faith speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who will go up into heaven, that is, to bring Christ down, or who will go down into the abyss, that is, to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is, the word of faith which we are preaching. That if you confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So we don't have the ability to go up to heaven or down to the abyss, but Christ had the ability to do both.
More organ.
Yeah.
More organ time. Yeah, I think the reason for the season, right? I mean, you guys have been nailing that. It is this incarnation thing is so much more central to the gospel than I think the average Christian really thinks about or realizes. That we had, you mentioned the God man, right? That we had God becoming a man and truly a man, the same way that you and I are a man. I think even that in and of itself, without all of the salvation stuff, but just that is enough to blow the average mind if we just sat and thought about it. Because here we're not talking about Zeus or some moron that can produce Hercules or something like that. Like, we're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about the almighty, inerrant, infallible God of the universe who is completely righteous, completely holy. The definition of righteousness and holiness and justice and love and all of these, like, this is the God we're talking about, who spoke and creation just happened. And that's the God who came to this planet that he created. And I think about that with the cross as well, right? Like from the beginning of his walk into this life to the crucifixion to the ascension, he died on a cross made from a tree that he created. That was stuffed into the ground on a hill that he formed with the flood.
Yeah.
Like, how ridiculous is that, right? And the incarnation is so different. The incarnation is where it all began. Like, that's where his life started here on earth, where his humanity came. So the very fact that the God of the universe humbled himself and then pooped his pants.
Yeah.
As a kid.
Right.
You know, and like all the things. He was a human. That's unfathomable for us. Unfortunately, I think today when people think about gods or God, they think like Thor or some trash from, like, you know, some movie they saw or whatever. They don't have the concept of Yahweh in mind.
Yeah.
Generally. So I think for me, Jesus, who, although existing in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a slave, by being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by God being humble.
Yeah.
The only being that shouldn't be humble, that has no reason to be humble. He humbled himself by becoming obedient, not only obedient, but obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And that, to me, is the reason for the season. Yeah. So, hey, you guys have anything else to add?
Nope.
Or are you guys ready to rock and roll? Go home, hold the mistletoe over mama?
Yeah.
Yeah? You guys good?
Yep, that was good.
Yeah? All right, cool. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in, especially if you stuck around through this long of a deal. And we will, hey, remember the reason for the season. Remember Christ and him crucified. And before that, he had to get here. He had to be incarnated. He had to put on our skin before he lived a life we couldn't live, died a death we deserved, was raised from the dead to conquer Satan, sin, and death, and now intercedes for us at the right hand of the Father. So remember Jesus Christ, the reason for this.